I said I didn't want to talk about The Last of Us Part 2 anymore, so I won't. We'll just talk about The Last of Us Part 3. But before we get into today's video, I did finish Ghost of Tsushima, and I loved it. It is, or ended up being, exactly what I thought it would be. A still very, very good game. But so stay tuned for like that review and the Death Stranding review. I didn't forget about that. As well as there's a huge lull in gaming right now. Nothing's coming out really like crazy big AAA. There are a couple indie games I do want to get into, as well as finishing up my catalog. So like Persona 5 I'll be getting done, Banner Saga 3 I'll be getting done, Remnant from the Ashes, as well as a few others. So I'll release reviews as they finish up, with the main ones being the ones I already mentioned. So this Last of Us Part 3 video is going to be a kind of what we know, what we've heard, what some people are expecting or want, what I personally think is going to happen in The Last of Us Part 3, because spoiler, The Last of Us Part 3 needs to happen. The debate was that The Last of Us Part 2 didn't need to happen. That debate is no longer relevant, and you're going to see why in a quote from our favorite Naughty Dog Vice President, Neil Druckmann. Well, multiple quotes. So I'm really excited. I'm going to try to be way more frequent. I know I say that a lot, as well as like streaming games. It's just very hard because I have been focusing a lot on art. So I do have a new outro that I made. So hopefully you enjoy that and today's video.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show. Yo, Grown Kid Talk Show.
As you know, I haven't been shy about The Last of Us coverage on the channel, and I've shown a couple of the collage I made of most of the videos I made on it. So I wanted to get into a little bit of background before we get to The Last of Us Part 3, as there's things in between The Last of Us Part 2 and 3 that are going to transpire, and mainly Paul Tassi of Forbes had this to say: The Last of Us Part 2 still has one more trick up its sleeve. Back when The Last of Us Part 2 was revealing different bits of itself to the public, Naughty Dog answered the multiplayer question way back in September 2019. Likewise, as development began on evolution of our factions mode, The Last of Us Part 1, the vision of the team grew beyond an additional mode that could be included with our enormous single-player campaign. Wanting to support both visions, we made the difficult choice that The Last of Us Part 2 would not include an online mode. Now, that is what got me very irritated. And now looking back on this statement, The Last of Us Part 2 is enormous. However, it was just so elongated. The story was a mirror of itself. You know, Abby and Owen go to an aquarium. Ellie and Joel go to the museum. There are very much parallels between each character that they kept doing back to back. So I felt like that made the game very large. It also felt very long because of the pacing issues. And this is where we really differ. Rather, I can see TLOU's faction multiplayer coming later down the line, likely as a free release, likely as something that is supported by a battle pass and a slate of cosmetic microtransactions. I did cover this. There was a leak that insinuated that there were going to be a battle pass for the game. I do think this guy's way off. It will not be free. Naughty Dog now has to prove and justify why they released this post The Last of Us Part 2. That's a big thing I got from this, is how are you going to justify charging us money for a game that we hated, but we love factions? So what are we going to do here? Now for the HBO series. We check out IMDb, The Last of Us here. Series premiere 2021. Joel and Ellie, a pair connected through the harshness of the world they live in, are forced to endure brutal circumstances and ruthless killers on a trek across post-pandemic America. Yes, this is a TV show based on the first game. They have tried to tell the story of the first Last of Us many times. There was a cartoon that got canceled, the comic of the Last of Us that was kind of like a prequel thing. They have really beat the dead horse with The Last of Us. Not the dead horse that Ellie and Dina ride that no one gives a shit about because they don't even mention. But the creators are Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin. Who is Craig Mazin? Well, This is Craig Mazin. He's a writer, producer, and an actor. What has he done? He's known for Chernobyl, Hangover Part 2, Identity Thief, and Huntsman. Craig Mazin praised Neil Druckmann as being, and I'm going to loosely quote here because this is what he said, the best video game writer, director, producer, whatever it was in the industry. A huge slight, in my opinion, to all the creative and great minds out there, but don't just straight up diss everybody in the industry. I thought it was a little tacky. So to look more into what's going on, it's directed by John Rennick. The writing credits are Neil and Craig, and it's produced by Craig, Carolyn Strauss, and Evan Wells, with the music by Gustavo. Great that the music is by Gustavo. More people should hear him. Awesome job in TLOU 1 and TLOU 2, even though they didn't play his music enough. But there was really nothing here to see because nothing has really been done and going on with The Last of Us HBO series. And why has nothing been going on? Well, I thought that it pertinent to, to look at that popularity has gone down. I called this out as being, totally whack and unnecessary. Because if you're just going to tell stories like a TV show in your video game, The Last of Us Part 2, then why do we need the TV show? Could it be is because The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't good, and now us fans thinking about it more, which I called out months ago, don't want to see this story even killed even more. Why would you want to watch a second season? Even if that season is so good, you're going to Game of Thrones Season 8, The Last of Us, into oblivion. So let's get into the meat of this. Let's talk about Last of Us Part 3. But before we do, I have something absolutely crazy going on in my brain. What if The Last of Us Part 2 isn't canon? What if they create The Last of Us TV show and create it well of the first game, and they get into the second season and Neil decides to run with a different story? What if the director there decides, oh yeah, this is terrible, let's do this instead? What if they create a better Last of Us 2 in the TV show? That would be my one little hope for the Last of Us franchise. The Last of Us Part 2 wouldn't be canon, it would be some Elseworld story, and we can look at it so much differently in that lens. How dope would that be? Now, a lot of this spurred from this article by Sci-Fi Wire. Trent Moore, Neil Druckmann teases there could be a Last of Us Part 3, but don't hold your breath. Interesting that he says the word could and not that there will be, as everything should indicate that there should be a Part 3 of this game. You can't leave the game in such a mess right now. It just doesn't make sense to use the word could. It should be should. Let's get into this article. In an interview with GQ, Druckmann teased that once he started wrapping up work on Part 2, his mind started to drift to the next thing. It's very clear that his mind fucking wandered to outer space while he thought about an ending to this game, because maybe then, if he didn't wander, it would have been good. He admitted that the next thing could be Part 3. Or the next thing could be some new IP. Here, we've gotten way more of an indication of a Part 3 than we did with Part 2. That is important for, Naughty Dog fandom. Druckmann said a bit more to IndieWire about the odds of a potential Part 3 to return to everyone's favorite post-apocalypse, but opened up about how the law of diminishing returns makes any potential reunion that much harder to pull off. Basically, it took years to figure out a story worth telling in Part 2, so he's not extremely confident they'll find it for Part 3 anytime soon, though it could happen. It's very interesting that he talks about how long it took to find a story worth telling. Interesting, because the story that he deemed worth telling was just a pile of shit. So I feel like anything they come up with in a quicker amount of time ought to be better than The Last of Us Part 2. But the real part here that might be a little confusing is the law of diminishing returns. Let's look that up. The law of diminishing returns means or is used to refer to a point at which the level of profits or benefits gained is less than the amount of money or energy invested. I don't know about you, but if there's something you love, a project or whatever, you don't care if you're gonna make a penny off of it because it's worth it to you. The idea that he's now equating The Last of Us as something more than his baby that, he just murdered with The Last of Us Part 2, and it clearly didn't do financially as well as they probably wanted it to. of a diminishing return, as if this was a solely monetary transaction, should tell you where this man is at in his headspace, what he's really thinking about, what really matters to him. Now, it just doesn't have to be money. It could be the energy. Again, when you love something, you're going to put time and effort and energy into it no matter what. I don't believe he has that same love for the franchise as he did with that first game. I do think he might regret actually making this piece of trash. And this just says a lot. Continuing on, I think the test for whether or not to make part 3, which is just a dumb thing to say, you will make it, would have to be similar test we did to part 2. Please, whatever the fuck test you did, whoever failed the test, okay? No more tests. Just make a good game. With the first game, there was no expectations and it was like we could do anything. But now that we've established certain characters and themes and processes, it felt like to justify making a part 2, we had to do something not that fans would be comfortable with, but to do something that would match the emotional core we found in the first game. This is inherently the problem with The Last of Us Part 2. It is shock value versus suspense. They felt like they need to be so emotionally over the top, where the first game was emotionally organic. That's the thing. And with that, there'd be no reason to do a part 3. Finding it with the sequel was much harder than it was in the first game. And going forward, it'd be exceptionally harder to justify going back to that world and finding a way to vary things up. Why do you have to vary things up? And the idea that he's basically saying there's no reason to do part 3. There is more of a reason to do part 3 than there ever was for a part 2. This makes no goddamn sense. But I do get what he's trying to say. He's just, A, not backing it up with what has transpired, and B, talking out of his ass. There's already so many things you've seen about the backstory, about the outbreak happens, so you really have to figure out how to create a new experiences that matches the emotional impact of these stories, and I don't know what it is currently. I get the idea that you want to recreate the moment, but instead of recreating a moment that you had in the first game, create a new moment. Don't try to just keep looking to the past. It seems like he's looking to the past as if whatever they had did, he's trying to capture it again. You just have to move on and let the art flow. I say this because the creator of God of War has he was quoted as saying he has the next 5 games ready because he wrote a story, loves that story, and has decided to tell parts of it in games when, it's time for the game. If The Last of Us Part 2 has just been a story they've been writing on the fly, it's no wonder that we ended up with a Part 2 the way it is. It's just Neil Druckmann going off the top of his fucking dome as if he could freestyle. It makes sense, especially considering how Part 2 played out. No, it doesn't make sense at all. Whatever he said, and you're equating this to this as it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. Not to get into spoilers, but the game made some major shakeups to fans' expectations, as if that's a good thing. With surprise deaths and perspective changes that brought a whole new set of questions and ambitions to the world. That was hard enough to pull off. Finding a way to even further subvert expectations and surprise fans would obviously be even harder. That's subversion. It's like they're jacking off over there, to subverting their thoughts. Oh my god, I can't wait to subvert. Come on, man. Can you just give us a good game? Is it bad to meet our expectations? And mind you, our only fucking expectation was that The Last of Us Part 2 was going to be a good game. That is the only expectation that fucking matters. Any other thing else is up for debate. But it seems like you didn't plan it out with prior thinking if you don't even have an idea of where you would want to take The Last of Us Part 3. But don't worry, Neil Druckmann. I have the idea for you. It makes sense. I know you're gonna hate it. But before we get to my idea, let's get into one idea that is already out there in the world by Alexandria Sarkalarviu, pronounced that wrong, who The Last of Us Part 3 should focus on now. The Last of Us franchise deserves one more entry, and exploring the adventures of this side character would be a perfect way to end the series. Focus on that word perfect, because this is by no means perfect. Many characters in The Last of Us Part 2 weren't particularly loved by players, and after being forced to fight both for and against her for so long, people are likely not as interested in being Ellie again as they were before the game came out. However, choosing to focus on a character close to Ellie would still allow her to be incorporated into the new game alongside other beloved characters such as Tommy, Dina, and other familiar faces at Jackson County. That's why the perfect protagonist for another Last of Us game is baby JJ, the son of Dina and Jesse. This is fucking trash. First of all, why this is trash. You destroyed Ellie. The fact that you're even admitting here in this blurb that we don't want to play as Ellie anymore just shows how bad of a job Naughty Dog did, number one. Number two, they destroyed established characters. So there isn't really a character in The Last of Us Part 2 that we as players care about. I would argue that Tommy would be the one had they not destroyed his character and me not wanting them to revisit and destroy him even more. They did Tommy so dirty in this game. I said Tommy was playing a better game than me. Whatever Tommy was doing, I wish the game just focused on Tommy. But by the end, what they did to him and how they made him seem and look was just terrible. And of course, you have to cripple the men in this game because every man is just shit in this game. I mean, that's what it is. Once Dina takes baby JJ and leaves Ellie, it's unclear where the mother and son go. No, it's very clear. Dina takes baby JJ back to Jackson. There is no other logical choice here. We got the letters from Jesse's parents saying, hey, I wish you two would come to Jackson. I want to be with my grandson. But you know, Dina and Ellie being so fucking selfish, they just take that right away. So she's going to go back to Jackson. Following the adventures of JJ would be an opportunity for Naughty Dog to answer questions player had at the end of the second game. The Last of Us Part 3 could explore JJ helping lead and operate Jackson County as an adult, and could hopefully answer if Dina and Ellie records ever reconciled, or if Tommy and his wife made things work. The writer of this is clearly, in love with the drama of The Last of Us Part 2. Last of Us Part 2 is about love triangles. I think there's 2 or 3 separate love triangles in this game. And they clearly they fell into the Teen Degrassi pop shit that The Last of Us Part 2 is trying to do. I don't give a shit if Dina and Ellie reconcile. In fact, I hope they don't, because it would make for a better story, especially if Dina goes back to a man, and not Ellie. I think it would make for a good story, that anyway. And Maria got no shine in this game at all. If anything, she's just a bitch the whole time. So I don't care about Maria at all. I don't care if they reconcile. Maria should have stuck by her husband, knowing what he had to do. End of fucking story. Same thing with Dina. You don't ask Ellie at the end of the game, well, if you love me, stay. Fuck that. Understand what they have to do and just stand by them. If The Last of Us Part 3 was set a couple of decades into the future, even better, a third game set 20 years into the future could explore what's going on outside of America. Perhaps JJ could make contact with foreigners that have better resources to fight off the infected. Either way, focusing on baby JJ gives the Last of Us franchise an opportunity for a fresh facelift, without completely veering away from the characters and elements that have made the franchise so popular. This is the last quote we're going to read from this. This is just dumb. I don't want to focus on JJ. I damn sure don't want to go multiple years into the future, though I have said this. The Last of Us Part 2 could have been a Twilight Story-esque type of thing, where they focus on characters in somewhere else. They don't touch our characters, they make a whole new story somewhere else in the same world. That would have been dope. But don't give me that now for this Part 3. I'm gonna tell you what The Last of Us Part 3 should be about, based on my opinion and what I got from the game. And my thumbnail should really say it all, right? The little baby was just to reference this shitty idea. The main point here is Ellie and Abby. I think The Last of Us Part 3, if it makes any sense at all, would be Ellie and Abby teaming up, and Ellie going through what she always said she wants to go through. My biggest problem with Ellie as a character is she blamed Joel for her own shortcomings. This is me giving credit to a game that did no work to justify what I'm about to say, but here we go. Ellie cannot come to terms with the idea that she would not make the decision to sacrifice her life for the Fireflies, for the cure, so she blames Joel. That's why when we see Joel all the time, she's just pissy and mad. A 14-year-old girl doesn't have the agency to make that decision. especially unconscious. So for her to even be mad at Joel is just a facade. I think the third game will explore Ellie going to Jackson. Yes, I think Ellie will go to Jackson for supplies. See Dina with her new husband and little baby JJ, who won't remember her at all, hopefully. Abby with the boy, girl, I forget the name, whatever. They are with the Fireflies. Their brand has, gone up a little bit, and they're still looking for the cure. I think Ellie will seek out the Fireflies to finally do what she said she would do, and blame Joel for. I think they will end up teaming up. Abby has to protect Ellie because Ellie is the cure, and they have to sacrifice her life. So Abby will sacrifice her life for Ellie. Ellie will sacrifice her life for the cure, and The Last of Us Part 3 will be focused on that and hopefully end. I call it shock value the game because how shocking would it be that Ellie and Abby are friends? Best friends. That's my theory in The Last of Us Part 3. Let me know what you think The Last of Us Part 3 will be about. I do 100% believe we'll get it. I do believe we'll be playing for multiplayer factions. I do think the HBO series will be okay. However, I am hoping that they take the second season of that series, or whatever's based on the second game, and just erase Part 2 entirely and make a new canon. Let me know what you think. I know the video was long. I know it was packed. I'm the Grown Kid, and I'll catch you back in another video.
Yo, it's the Grown Kid Talk Show.